Aloha and good morning, everyone, and happy Mother's Day again. Show of hands, how many of you are mother or consider yourselves mother figures out there? All right. Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, a mother has to be a woman, but you know what? There are many, many people who are playing those roles in our lives or in others' lives that are not just female, but, just take on that compassion and divine feminine. And so today is a great day and a day that we all celebrate to honor them and their essence and their presence. And today I'd like to talk about some people's kids. And I don't know if you've ever heard that terminology, but, there are some people's kids out there that just like to go about and do things their way. And we're going to just explore those kids and their parents here. But first, I want to talk about motherhood. So in motherhood, there's some unspoken expectations. Being a mother comes with all of these unsaid things that need to happen. So not only have we taken on, let's say, the baby boomers out there, kind of the traditionalist type of roles where the mom stays at home, cooks and cleans, but then as we get into the further generations like Generation X and millennials, we're also, as mothers, expected to go out there and provide for the family because nowadays you need two incomes apparently to survive. And so we're at home cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. We're also at work doing those things. And this just doesn't apply to just the feminine. This could be male who's are fulfilling that role as well. But we carry some baggage from generations. And whenever someone acts up a kid, who's the first person they look at? The mother. The mother is always, for some reason, the guilty party in all of this. And I've been on the receiving end of some very despondent stares throughout my years. Not that my kids are necessarily bad or anything, but, they tend to have their own mind and do their own thing. And mothers also have a lot of things that, before I had kids, had I known what I was signing up for, I would have still done it, of course, but I would have just been very mindful of every single action that I was doing, and because there's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrifice. There is a lot of late nights, and mothers know, fathers do as well, late nights, some worried minds at times, and as mothers, we're called to action at a moment's notice. It's kind of like always being on call. If you're a doctor or a physician out there, sometimes you're on call for 24 hours, and then you're off for 48 or what have you. But as a mother, it's a 24/7, 365-day job. And at times it can be rather thankless. But I think that at the end of one's life, they can look back and reflect on it being hopefully a pleasant experience, and hopefully their children can relay the same. But when we talk about a mother's sacrifice, I'd like to look at this biblical story. And then we look at 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16 through 28, and it recounts two mothers living in the same house. Does anybody know that with King Solomon? And so he was judged to be the wisest and the fairest in the land at the time. And each mother had an infant son in this house. And so they came to Solomon because one of the babies had been smothered, and each claimed that the remaining son was theirs. And calling for a sword, Solomon declared his judgment that the baby would be cut into two. Now, one of the mothers gladly accepted this and said, yes, okay, fine, I will take half of that baby. But the real mother begged Solomon and said, give the baby to her, just don't kill him. Solomon then declared that the second woman was the true mother, as a true mother would have never allowed something like that to happen to their baby. And so even that wisdom back in the day, and that story is used all the time just to show what true motherly love does. It sacrifices, it's willing to lose in order for the one that it loves to gain. And that's one of the blessings of being a mother as well, is that we get to really go to the very depths of our soul and dig up whatever is there, this love, this capacity to love that we just didn't know resided within us. Many people tell the story that they didn't know what true love was until they had a child, or that they were nervous or scared or what have you while they were pregnant, but then the moment that they laid eyes on their daughter, on their son, it was love at first sight. And there's not many instances in life where we can say there was love at first sight. But almost always, with a mother to her child, it's an instantaneous emotion that just never goes away. Now, we do get upset with the children as they get older, and we'll go into some of those things, the little antics. But in the end, that initial love, that bond that is formed, endures throughout one's lifetime. Now, with motherhood, there's also some other things that I just didn't know would happen, and that is unsolicited advice. And so there is somebody out there that will tell you exactly how to raise your kids because they had something that happened like that to them, similar, whatever, 30 years ago, and this is the way they went about it. And while I love unsolicited advice, I truly do, I know that people mean well, but when you have your friends, your family, strangers at the store telling you how they would have handled a situation, it can be a little bit consuming. And some people's children will wreak havoc in the neighborhood. And what I find interesting is that all of those kids, the really bad ones, the ones that are climbing up the walls, that are terrorizing whatever in the neighborhood, those are the parents for some reason that like to give me advice. They're the ones that tell me which way is left and which way is right. And I am just almost always astounded at their great wisdom and how they've applied it to their own offspring. And I see all of their fruits. And because they're dangling from the tree over there, they're on the roof over there, and they just jumped off something over there. And so, that's one of the things that I do, or actually I don't do anymore, is that I refuse to give out advice on other people's kids. I learned a long time ago that will only bring me great discomfort. First of all, I got enough problems of my own with my own kids. I don't have any business telling you how to raise yours. I promise you. Second of all, there's something about a mother's pride when you're coming to her and just letting her know that something ain't right with little Johnny. They take great offense to that, as I did. And third thing is the law of comeback. The moment, and when I say the moment I try to give advice to anyone about their kids, I promise you my child is out there already doing that, proving this a lesson for myself. It's this law, this boomerang effect. So the moment I open my mouth and I say, you know what you ought to do, I know that I'm going to have to ought to do that pretty soon. And so I'm going to have to take my own advice. And I just don't do it anymore. I fear what would happen next, I suppose. And one thing that I did do is that a long time ago, I gave my mother some advice regarding my siblings. And I said to my mom, where parents do too much for their children, the children will not do enough for themselves. Now, I want you to remember that I said this. I was 17 at the time, okay? So we're going to come back to that, how this wonderful piece of advice that 17-year-old Johanna gave to her mother came back. But before we get into that boomerang, I'd like to share a story about my family and the neighborhood that I grew up in. And growing up in Chicago, we had this family in the neighborhood. We had this wonderful neighborhood that we grew up in. We had mixed families, Mexican and black, white, Haitian. So there was just this plethora of just unique cultural experiences. But there was these kids in the neighborhood, and they called them Bebe's Kids. Does anybody know what Bebe's Kids are? All right. So Bebe's Kids was a cartoon that happened in the 90s, and it was about these little kids that just went on a spree. I don't know if they were, sometimes they were intentionally bad, but they just terrorized everybody, and they loved getting into trouble. Well, these particular kids in the neighborhood had eventually been called or been known as Bebe's Kids. And this flock of terror, there were 4 of them, would love to go around the neighborhood and have fun. And by fun, I mean wreak havoc wherever they went. They would, during the fall time in Chicago, we had ditches around our blocks. They would put all the leaves, the dried up leaves there, and then they would set the block on fire. And after Christmas time, they would gather up all the neighborhood trees that were just totally dried out and set the woods on fire. They were something else. One summer, I do recall, they had firecracker wars, and I'm not sure if you know what Roman candles are, but they shoot balls of fire out, and they went around doing drive-bys to the neighbors with those. And, well, actually, a lot of the kids in the neighborhood did. You know, it's just one thing after another. They loved to really go at it. And to this day, I don't think anybody knows why. Eventually, other parents realized that this family, more like this gaggle of kids, were just bad news. And each concerned parent prohibited their child from hanging out with this clan. And if I do recall correctly, the ringleader, Johanna, grew up to eventually become a minister in Hawaii. So, you know, but that's just one thing. I'm sure my mother, as a mother, I could never have had a child like me or my siblings. We were 1 year apart, so I'm the eldest, and so I was the ringleader. I usually came up, you know, the night before. We conjured up plans on what we were going to do the next day, especially during summertime, and then we went at it, and then we would get some of the other neighborhood kids to come along on our mischief and adventure, which is fine. But, you know, as a parent, I can't even imagine what that did to my mother. And so I want to, first of all, if my mom is watching, thank you for tolerating us and doing the best that you could under the circumstances that we created for you. I can only imagine the anxiety of staying up late at night, waiting for us to come home, the annoyances from the constant visits from police or the calls from teachers, parents in the neighborhood, other authorities. And after a while, I can imagine that my mom felt quite powerless in her position as a mother. But we kids come into this world with our own agenda, don't we? And everybody here is a kid. Everybody's got a parent. So we were once kids, and I still consider myself a kid at times. But we're all here for our unique journey and purpose. And I'm certain that my mother received her fair share of how to control your kid lectures from the neighbors and from maybe psychologists or what have you. But there is a resilience in motherhood, too. You know, us 4 kids, year after year, beat her down with our own antics, not physically, but, you know, just emotionally. And there's something special within a mother's heart. There is this compassion and this patience and this love that just endures. And Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, once spoke to it in a sermon regarding that feminine divine, that feminine aspect of God to be the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit comforts. The Holy Spirit provides guidance. And the Holy Spirit is this patient presence within each one of us. So that divine feminine aspect, Charles Fillmore said in one of his Mother's Day sermons, is that feminine aspect within all of us. And that whole spirit of God. God is all things. And so while you have this masculine energy, there's always this balance. Nature is always looking to provide balance. And since all things come from God, of course, there would be that balance. Now, I personally, whenever I say God, I kind of think of the masculine energy. But whenever I want to be comforted, I do think of the Holy Spirit and that feminine component of the divine. And it's always reassuring. I feel protected with the father, and I feel loved and nurtured with the mother. And then the whole package is one. It's just this feeling of safety that I get. So that's why I like to, and I think that's why unity is so important in New Thought as a movement, because we recognize that there are these varying degrees and that it's just not a one-size-fits-all, or this man up in the sky that's looking down in judgment and blessing you when he wants to and taking away blessings if you do something wrong. We have a different way of looking at that. And when we can see that this presence is loving, and we can start to personalize it for ourselves, you'll start to feel something warm and comforting happening within you and through you and as you, and just knowing that you're never apart from that energy. Now, I don't care how masculine or how beefed up from the, what is it called? What are they, working out places? Gyms? Yeah, fitness places. Each one of us, there's a call to develop this, because you never know. The person that you meet next may need that reassurance. And since we are that outpicturing of God itself, each one is called to develop both this masculine, this protection, this safety, and this feminine of comfort and patience as well. And so we have all of these aspects, and mothers really do embody that, because some people's kids seem to rage against the machine. And the moment that controls are implemented is the moment that they decide to go to town. And what better person than to be patient with a child that has their own agenda than mothers? And as a mother now myself, I quickly forgot. And when I say I quickly forgot, I mean I forgot everything about my childhood when I started having children. I forgot exactly all the suffering and pain that I put my parents through. And how silly of me to desire obedience and pleasantness from my children. When maybe there was a couple of times it was very pleasant, but probably 5 or 6 before I saw the real world out there and I wanted to have fun. But when I demonstrated as a child just that willingness to just, go forward, why would I ever expect my children not to do the same thing? I thought they were going to be perfect angels. And one thing that us parents do, and I'm not sure if your parents ever did this to you or somebody said this to you, but I remember my mom says, just wait until you have kids of your own. That is, to me, those are fighting words. Those are curse words. Because did I know what I was getting into? It's almost like a curse on to somebody's future there when you say, wait till you have kids. So be mindful of what you speak to your own children or to your grandchildren or to even the neighborhood kids, because, I wouldn't want anything like that to fall upon anyone else. And so in true form, because I was a rotten kid, I stepped out into motherhood as a teenager. I was 16 years old. And by the time I was 17, I was offering advice to my mother because I knew what was happening in the world. I was grown up now with a child of my own as a teenage mother. How silly of me. And no one could tell me different. I was almost that I was indignant. And so my brothers and my sister were still out there having a wild time. I had settled down a bit. And then that's when I decided that I knew as much as my mother did. Wrong. I was absolutely wrong about that. And in having children, I realized that there comes a point in time when your child looks up to you and considers you their hero. I'm sure many of you have had that experience. Now, it doesn't really last for long. And if it lasted all their lives for you, then that is wonderful. You did a great job. So not many of us have that last for too long. But I do remember my daughter, Leilani. When I was in the Air Force, she wanted to be in the military. When I was pre-med, she wanted to be a doctor. She even went online at 5 or 6 years old, and there was this little game you could play where you could do hip replacement surgery. And she loved doing the hip replacement surgery online. You couldn't, have the bone touch other things, and so she got pretty good at it. When I was an anti-terrorism officer, she wanted to do that. She would even come to work with me just so she could learn these things. And then eventually, when I got into ministry, she would sit up in room 201 here in the classrooms and sit there and take notes and do the assignments that Reverend Gary Kanye gave, and she wanted to be a minister. I should have just sat back and just cherished those moments. But I think I took them for granted because I just don't know what I was thinking, because quickly something strange happened. She entered middle school. And once adolescence hits, it's every man for himself or every kid for himself. I soon found myself competing with all of her friends, social media, Instagram. No longer was I the cool mom. I couldn't give her a kiss in front of her friends. How dare I drop her off right in front of the school, And I went from hero to zero pretty quickly. And I remember growing up or she being a kid, and she would just look up to me and we'd be dancing around, and now it's just like, Mom, you don't know how to dance, and ew, your music is horrible. And then I just had to sit there and say, oh, this is what my mom cursed and blessed me with. All right. So, yeah, I found myself competing with everything. And like I mentioned before, everyone is on their own journey. And as mothers, when that journey looks different than what you imagined it would be, it can feel like a smite to the sacred relationship of mother and child. Seeming impostors take over with their own agenda. So music gets too loud suddenly. I used to be the one playing the loud music, and now, if I hear it, banging on the walls, suddenly I have become an adult. And I didn't know when that happened. I figure it was after 17. But I just realized that I'm no longer cool anymore to my children. But I don't cry about that, because I'm kind of proud that from the streets of Chicago to the island of Oahu, a lot has taken place. And I've done a lot of growing and a lot of just unfolding and becoming that true essence and embracing that divine feminine presence. When I first stepped on the campus here at Unity Church Hawaii, I had just recently left my anti-terrorism job with the military, and I was not a hugger. You can ask anybody. I think it was Reverend Gio that I think had the biggest concern for me, because I just wasn't a hugger. I just, I didn't see the point of it. I was like, oh, somebody's too close. But I hadn't developed that compassion, that presence. But being in this community, and every single Sunday, everybody just loving to hug, eventually everybody wore off on me, and now I like doing that. And when we get back to hugging, we'll be hugging again. And so when I look forward to that, surprisingly, yeah. So as mothers, we have this tendency to just think that, we are our kids. What the behavior of the children is a direct reflection on our parenting skills. And others think the same thing. And I think the same thing about your kids, by the way. But in truth, they are here for their holy purpose, for the purpose that God put them here. We are just called to nurture, to take care of them as long as we can, to provide a good foundation, and to move them on their way. Do not take anything personally. When a child is 5, they're so cute, and when they're 15, you want to give them the boot. And so, in between 15 and let's say 35, there's these highs and these lows, because I'm looking back at my own relationship with my mother, and I'm realizing we were good to go when I was little, and then as a teenager, I just didn't really like her for some reason. I have no idea. I was raging against the machine, remember, at that point in time. But now, at 40, My mother is my best friend, and I can say that I love her just more than anything in the world. We talk about everything, and she loves God just as much as I do, and maybe because we're on similar paths, we found that connection, but we've grown closer, and so that gives me hope for my own daughter. Because, at times because she's 17 right now, and she's going off to college in this, the fall, in California. And so now I've got to learn to just trust that the parenting that I did as a mother is going to be enough. When we were living in Portugal, I remember she was, I think it was maybe 2 years old or something like that. And there would be this 10-year-old kid, this little girl, that would come and just love to play with Leilani. And we had a park right outside of our apartment complex. And she would come and pick up Leilani and bring her to the park. And I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, what if she, how's she going to walk down those stairs? Because we lived on the second floor and walk up the stairs. And now, and over the years, all these different milestones, what I was nervous about, what I had dreaded or uncertain for her for, such as walking upstairs or taking her first step or, going to the bus stop by herself, all these milestones were reached successfully. And so I have to trust that whatever it was that I taught her, that it's working, that she's remembering those lessons and those values. And just trust in God, ultimately, that presence, which is in her, that guides, directs, and animates her, and all my children, will continue to do so, even when I am not looking. So every child has a unique journey. And biblically, we can look at the prophets in their journey. And I'm sure in their own way, the townspeople were frowning upon their parents because they were such iconoclasts. They were doing things that were going against the establishment. And nowadays, when we see kids going against the establishment, oh, you better rear them in, and we have a good talking to them. And how dare Moses and Jesus and others challenge the ways of the world at that time? But then again, right? Some people's kids, they're going to do what they do. And not to say that Jesus was setting fires to the block or anything. What he was doing was upholding his call and following that call and that journey that God placed him on. And we don't know what the journey and the call is that is placed upon our own children or grandchildren and neighbors' children on their hearts. We like to imagine that we have an idea, but we really don't. So we just have to trust that not all kids are looking for a thrill like those Kelly kids. Not every child is out there doing wrong and then trying to get away with it. And every child's journey is unique. And as parents, as mothers, we have within us this divine essence to endure the journey with them. There are parents out there that say goodbye to their children too soon, where lives are cut short, where they didn't get another day. I guess I'm grateful that I have. So, for those parents, those mothers, I cannot imagine. And I send my blessing, my prayer, my thoughts, and my love to you, knowing that that love is always there. There is no separation. And that I may not know what you have gone through. And being Mother's Day today, it could be possibly a very tough day. And so we hold you in our hearts during these times for those parents, for those mothers that don't have their child with them any longer. And that's part of the journey as well, is that we don't know from day to day whether the I love you or the don't talk to me again will be the last thing that we speak to our child. And so we're called to just show up as that divine presence, to be more understanding, to be more compassionate. And perhaps nobody understood this journey more than Jesus' mother, Mary. I cannot imagine being Mary on that Good Friday at the cross as Jesus was being crucified. And during his life, Jesus he went against things. He caused a stir. But Mary supported him, his mother. And as Jesus was there on that cross, speaking his 7 last words or 7 last sayings, he remembered his mother. And he gave his mother to his disciple John. He remembered that divine, loving, feminine essence. And as Mary would stand there, with her heart open wide, maybe not understanding all of the reasons why Jesus did the things that he did, but still being of support, as mothers are. I don't know why children do the things they do. My mom doesn't know why, and I don't even know why I did the things that I did. But she stood there and she supported me. And it doesn't mean that I agree with what you're doing, but it means that I love you enough to be of support when you need me. And that's what mothers are. It's this love, this comfort that endureth forever. Just like the Father's love. Something in that split second when our children arrive into this world, something is formed and it cannot be broken. Even if the relationship doesn't look as healthy as it should. There's something within the very recesses of our heart that will never give up hope on that child, that will continue to love that child. And now let us take this time to just focus on the feminine divine within, that presence. Closing the outer eye. And just breathing into the heart space that this presence, this love, this comfort is always available to us. That we are one with the divine feminine. That when we need more love, all we need to do is look within. The whole Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, is there, waiting for you to bring to the altar of consciousness any concern, any doubt, any worry, is there to provide that guidance and that support. All it asks is just to lean on me, child. Lean on me. Trust in me. Be still and know that I am. And let us take this into the silence.